Hey everyone, it's Will, GamerDad, with another video for you. So I do apologize for the delay in putting up this particular video. It's taken some time to kind of actually record all 3 chapters as well as some of those side quests and voice acting dialogues. Anyways, in this video we're going to challenge the very hard version of the dungeon where you can earn light or shadow for the new Tales of characters. Now if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel, I really appreciate it. Also, I do have a Patreon account for those who want to support me this way. So, actually this is not my very first venture. This is about my second or third try in, and I actually really had to optimize my team in order to kind of travel through these areas in order to take on the different bosses. And I'll talk about those as I get through it. So the very first area will be the same. It's all fire units, and it's the same as other areas where you do have to fight a group, 5 groups of mobs, and then go on. The enemy will disappear just like other dungeons. It is not like a guerrilla dungeon where they'll have unlimited spots. That being said, you do want to fight all the different battles because each successful battle, either against a horror or a group of mobs, will give you those dream color ink points, and you'll need those to unlock the ability to get the personal weapons and Grasta for all the 4 Tales of characters. Now in terms of the requirements in entering this particular dungeon, you do have to have at least 1 Tales of character. The reason why is this dungeon is actually very similar to the Symphonies dungeon for the Persona 5 team, where there's going to be 4 exits at a certain point in the dungeon to fight the boss, and obviously you can only exit the dungeon if you have one of the Tales of characters to choose the appropriate path in order to challenge that particular elemental boss and move on. Obviously, if you bring more characters, you'll have more choices at the end. However, I highly recommend only bringing 1, if 2, especially during the first initial encounters. And the reason why is these mobs and horrors are extremely tough, actually. And they start at level 70, and the horrors are level 80. So, as challenging as most tough content. Also note that because the first area is fire-based, you'll definitely want at least 1 water unit on your team to help kill off the mobs and the horror. It does have resistances against its own element, the elements that it would normally be resistance against, so watch for that. However, some of the enemies do have weaknesses to either magic, blunt, slash, or pierce, and you can kind of see which ones will have that. That shell one, for example, would be weak to pierce, just like its other cousins. So if you've been playing the game for a while, you'll kind of recognize which kind of enemy types will be weak to certain ones, because all of the ones kind of look the same, even if they're of different colors, will be weak to that weapon element. And obviously, if it's a certain elemental type, you'll use the opposite element to beat it. So in this case of fire, you'll use water. Now in this area, this is the second area, and this is a water-based one. So for those who've already finished the game, of course, you'll recognize that the first area is for the fire sword, and the second area is for the water sword. That being said, since it is a water area, you'll want to have at least 1 earth unit on your team, especially ones that have AoE. So being that the mobs are quite tough, you definitely want to bring multiple AoE units. I did bring Aya Suzette, just because she's my waifu, and you'll need some sort of boss killer anyways, because the bosses are no joke either. If you're wondering, I did actually record all 4 different bosses, so this is one complete run through, fighting Cress's boss, and then after that will be a clip of all the other 3 Tales of bosses as well, just for your convenience, so you can refer to it and see what kind of difficulty level we're talking about here. Now, if you notice my team setup, I do have 1 of each element on my team, so we have 1 wind, 1 fire, 1 water, and 1 earth. And of course, I do have, in this case, Crest in the back, as well as Joker. Now, for those who already own Joker, or are familiar with Joker, remember that he has an AoE that does pierce damage non-elemental to all enemies, and if the enemies are weak to pierce, then the 1 more ability from all Persona 5 characters will deal 2 hits, which is actually very useful. Also, he has some moves that are very useful. Aegir, which helps reduce type resistance by 35%, it is a magical attack, as well as Triple Burst, which is a 3-hit non-elemental piercing attack. And that will come into play later on against certain bosses as well. Let me know in the comments if you've gotten this far and how you found the dungeon grinding. I do find that the point collection is pretty slow. You do get rewards, for example, for collecting enough points. You get some chronostones along the way, and for those who are veterans of the game, you'll also get the requisite types of murmur scripts, prayer scripts, some guiding light, luring shadow items, so on and so forth. Some high class scrolls, that kind of thing. I believe the top line in order to finish all of the dungeons, like somewhere in the 200,000 point. I don't have the exact number here, but I've heard it's about 200,000 or so. And only after you get to that point that you can lock the fourth and final character for Tales of. So there's different milestones for the number of points you require in order to lock the first Tales of 5-star character of your choice, and then the second one, so on and so forth. Again, I haven't even gotten there. I'm actually just clearing my keys because, to be honest, it's been quite a slog uploading all these videos. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the content that I'm putting out, and I will continue to kind of slowly work through them as I have time. Now in this third area, some of the enemies, in this case those golem type things, are weak to magic, and so you having multiple magic users on your team is great. Otherwise, some of the enemies here are also weak to pierce, and so Joker's 2-hit AoE coming in from her VC will definitely make use of that. Now in terms of the horrors, I think this one is one of the tougher ones. I just AF right off the bat. In terms of the other two horrors in the first two areas, obviously if against the fire one, I can use Aqua Wall, which Mighty has. Against the water one, I have Earth Wall, which Myrus has. And so I am quite blessed to have the appropriate units. I do know my middle child has done this a few times because he actually doesn't record, so he has gotten way farther in the game than I have. He's using Tiramisu, and Tiramisu just walks through these mobs, one hit everything. As long as you have a 5-star version and enough spirit, which is from badges or gear, those will really make life easy for you. So you can see this is the end area, and there are 4 lights, and you have to choose the one that's appropriate to the your Tales of character that you want to increase the light or shadow of. Keep in mind that this is like most dungeons. If you're using a red key, which is a very hard version, you'll have a 20% chance of getting a 1 light or 1 shadow for the appropriate character. If you have a green key, it's only a 10% chance. In my case, I'm running all red keys for now, just to kind of get as many points as possible, because as you can expect, if you run green keys, you'll make less points, therefore using more keys and more resources for getting those dream color inks. I would rather use my green keys towards Antiquity Garrelia or present-day Garrelia. For those who aren't that far, if you're needing chance scripts, Ruins of Rakiana is another great way to gather Git as well as a chance of a chance script. Okay, so we're at the final boss. Each boss will be corresponding to that particular Tales of unit. So Crest is fire, so we're going to take on a fire boss. Note that they do establish zone, and so unless you replace it with your own, then you're going to have a tough time building an AF bar here. I mean, the boss itself doesn't hit for very much, at least in this particular one in my case. However, if you are having a tough time taking damage, obviously being that I already do have Mighty, we can cast Aqua Wall and take less damage. So if you are having a lot of issues, make sure you do that and have some defenses up. Obviously in this case, you would want to have int and power down as well, because he does both physical as well as magical attacks. Note that magic attacks are affecting it. There's no resistance that you can see here, and we're just going to slowly beat it down. If you had a half bar AF, which you could conserve from walking in through all the mobs, then you can definitely use it. So you note that the AF bar did not gain there because of the opposite, because fire is kind of more resistant to wind. In this case, the enemy is not resistant to our wind attacks, which is very, very lucky. But your AF bar doesn't build with those multi-hits, and so be very, very aware of that, that if you really have tough time with the bosses, one other option is to skip the horrors and take on the bosses directly with the bar. And there we have it, 1 crest light. Nice! Okay, so this is our second one that we're going to be tackling, wind type elemental enemy. Just like Cresses establishes zones, all of them will establish zones, so be very prepared in that sense. One other strategy is to skip the horrors if you need AF bars to kill those, and save it for your boss here. But that being said, you do get less Dream Color ink points, so you'll have to decide the trade-offs in order to fight the boss. One other thing to know is once you've run it a few times, you'll know which element you're going to have tough time with. Bring your 4th DPS or your 4th unit or one of your units with one that's appropriate to the battle. So for example, in the case of wind, if you're having issues, bring an extra fire type damager in order to win the game. In this case, for your convenience, I didn't change my team setup just to kind of show you what kind of challenges you can expect when wandering through. And to be fair, this is actually my first time going against this particular boss. So I kind of concentrated on filming the very hard dungeon run through once, and then these bosses were just kind of filmed afterwards. So hopefully share some insight as to the difficulty level. I do know that as you hit the bosses, once you get them to a certain HP point, they kind of reset and re-establish zones. So if you do hit them enough, and obviously if you're at the end game tackling these kind of things, you shouldn't have too much of a problem at least triggering those so it doesn't do any attacks. Hey, Yuri Shadow, nice. Okay, now we're on to the Earth boss. This one for Velvet is a very tough one. I would highly recommend having your wind user on your team, an extra one if possible. In this case, we have ASZ, and again, I didn't realize the difficulty of this particular boss. However, I am very glad to have had both ASZ as well as Joker, and you'll see why very shortly. So we're going to start off as usual, and we do have the ability to continue damaging since we do have wind attacks. We don't have Vena to have a wind wall. However, note that now that we've hit it a couple times, it has a 10 hit barrier. It does 0 damage, and I do realize that we're not taking a lot of damage. Keep in mind that I am casting Terra Fortress, which gives me physical resistance on my team from Myrus's Manifest. So in this case, being that I was a little bit surprised on taking this particular boss, we're going to put as many debuffs on the enemy as possible. We're going to use ASZ as our DPS, and we're going to use BC Impact to apply physical resistance down so that ASZ can kind of deal damage. See, note that we are taking over 1000 damage on Joker, obviously, as well as taking some damage from lesser damage from the other characters. So in this case, I built up enough of a bar because let's be honest, if you don't have enough of a bar, and being that Earth Zone is active, you may not have enough hits during the AF to hit the 10 hit barrier down and then subsequently do additional damage. In the case of ASZ with Manifest, once you get the Elegant Cavort stacks to 3, keep in mind that during AF, her Exquisite Blossom will do 4 hits repeatedly, and being that the enemy is vulnerable to wind, we're going to have less of a problem with that. Also note that Joker Triple Burst hits 3 times, and so even though he doesn't do a significant amount of damage, it brings down the barrier much more quickly. So having Joker on that particular battle will be very, very useful, especially being that the 10 hit barrier is there. So anyone with multi-hits will be very, very useful there. Okay, in our final boss, this is for Mila's end boss. This is the Aegir or Aegir. Obviously water establishes water type zone, and so this one was actually one of the tough ones as well, in my opinion. The reason why is, again, being that all my units, actually I only have one Earth unit on my team, which is Myrus. Everything else is resistant, unfortunately. However, as I figured out through this particular battle, it is not resistant to plane or non-elemental attacks. So Joker's Triple Burst does work fairly well here. I was initially using Exquisite Blossom to at least do multi-hits. Look, 0 bar build, which actually is a huge issue and actually dragged on the fight significantly. Also note that that AoE, which is in that water, is very similar to Mighty, which is almost like the Nightmare Gift, except as AoE. So it basically hits all of you and has a high chance of causing sleep. So he not only applies poison, he applies sleep. This boss is a nightmare, literally. So the goal at this point is to get up to a half bar. Again, I was unprepared and wasn't expecting the difficulty level of this particular boss. I should have stayed the half bar by AF and just barred it down. That being said, we are going to use plain hits to build up the bar to half bar, and then we're going to trigger a bar. Another annoying thing about this boss, it's just like Aqua Goddess AS Yuna, heals at the end of turn depending on how many water attacks it does, and in water zone. So yeah, this battle dragged out a lot. So the earth one and the water one are two significant challenges, and I do realize you have to fight far harder versions of this bosses, all 4 bosses, when you are trying to earn their 5-star weapon, 5-star ability, plus if you're going to get the true VC Grasta. So yeah, we're up for a significant challenge, but once I get there, hopefully I'll put up some videos, as I come through. Alright, so after a long, hard fought out battle, we got done. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.